The town of Ashwood, hidden among dense forests and quiet hills, has always been a place where time seemed to stand still. Its main attraction was Lake Gravemoor, deep and dark. It attracted both with its beauty and its disturbing silence. In the warmer months, locals swam here. Children played on the shores, and fishermen returned home with their catch. But recently, something has changed. The lake has become a source of fear. Lisa returned to Ashwood for the first time in 10 years. Her childhood was spent here, among these streets and familiar faces, but her memories were mixed. Her parents' house now seemed empty, and even the familiar smell of trees and dampness did not bring her peace. She had come to deal with her mother's inheritance, an old house and a few acres of land she had long since lost interest in. For the first few days, she tried to avoid talking to her neighbors. She only occasionally left the house to buy groceries at a small store off the main street. Soon, however, she began to hear conversations. At first, it was just fragments. The lake again, the disappearance. It's no accident. She remembered how, as a child, this place had always been a source of legends. Children used to make up stories about drowned cities underwater or a monster living at the bottom. But now the talk seemed not like fiction, but disturbing real fears. One morning, leaving the house, Lisa met an old man named Henry. He was a friend of her late mother's and always seemed a bit strange. Henry stopped her and, looking through his muddy eyes at her, whispered, "Stay away from the lake. This place has taken more than it should." At first she dismissed his words, but then something in his eyes made her think. That same day, she decided to take a walk to Gravemoor. On the way, the forest seemed strange. The sun shone through the branches, but its light was faint, as if the forest did not want to reveal all its secrets. Last year's grass rustled under her feet, and it was quiet around her, too quiet. When she reached the lake, the sight was amazing and disturbing at the same time. The smooth surface of the water reflected the sky, but seemed almost black. As she got closer to the shore, she noticed something unusual: several small crosses made of branches and pressed into the ground. They looked like makeshift monuments. Lisa sat down and touched one of them. "This is for the fisherman who disappeared last month," a voice said behind her. She turned around and saw a young man. He looked tired but calm. "I'm Michael. I'm here to help the local search for missing persons." He told her that over the past few months, 3 people had gone missing near the lake. First they were fishermen, then a young couple who decided to spend the evening by the water. Police checked the shore, but found no signs of a struggle or escape. "They just disappeared," Michael said. His words gave Lisa a mixed feeling of fear and curiosity. When Lisa returned home, she couldn't get Michael's words out of her head. Her mother had often told her that the lake had secrets, but she had always thought it was childish. Now that she had seen these crosses and heard the stories of disappearances, something inside her told her that this was only the beginning. She opened her mother's old chest, hoping to find at least a hint of what happened in this place. Among the papers she found newspaper clippings with headlines. "Child disappeared near Gravemoor. Fisherman never returned. Lake of Death." That night, Lisa couldn't sleep for a long time. Pictures kept spinning in her head. The smooth, black water, the crosses on the shore, Henry's eyes. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she had a feeling that the lake was not only hiding secrets, but was waiting for her. Lisa couldn't stop thinking about the lake. Even during the day, when she was cleaning the old house, her mind kept returning to the crosses on the shore and Michael's words. She felt as if something was pulling her back to Gravemoor, as if the lake itself was waiting for her to return. Late one night, tired from insomnia, Lisa decided to open her mother's diary. It was an old book with torn pages and yellowed paper that was kept in the bedside table. Her mother had always been secretive and almost never talked about her life. Now Lisa realized that her diary might hold the answers. The pages were filled with even handwriting. At first, the entries seemed ordinary, everyday worries, event in the town. But the further Lisa read, the more the mood of the entries changed. One page in particular caught her attention. Asterisk, the lake is taking away. I can't keep quiet. But who will believe me? I saw it happen. The boy. God, that boy. His eyes were looking right at me as he disappeared into the water. Lisa felt a chill run through her body. Her mother had witnessed the disappearance of a child. But why did she never talk about it? And what did the lake takes away mean? The next morning, Lisa decided to meet Henry, who seemed to know more than he was willing to let on. She found him on the veranda of his small house. The man was smoking silently, staring into the forest. When Lisa told him about the diary, his face turned pale. He was silent for a long time, and then spoke softly. Your mother knew that this lake was cursed. She saw how it started, but she was afraid. Everyone was afraid. Henry told a story that made Lisa feel like the ground was slipping from under her feet. Many years ago, when her mother was still young, a group of teenagers had brutally abused a younger boy on the shore of a lake. His name was Peter. They pushed him into the water, and no one helped him. The lake was calm, but the boy never came out again. Henry admitted that he was there, but he was afraid to intervene. He saw those involved in Peter's death start to disappear one by one. This lake remembers. It does not forgive, he said, trembling. Lisa realized that the disappearances of the fisherman and the young couple were not just accidents. The lake was taking revenge, taking those who had a connection to its past. But what did this mean for her? Why did she also feel its presence? That evening, Lisa decided to return to the lake. She knew it was dangerous, but she felt she had to do something. The lake greeted her with its cold, calm shine. She stood on the shore, looking at its smooth surface, and suddenly saw a shadow. It was moving underwater, approaching her. Lisa stepped back but did not run away. She wanted to know what was there. And then she heard a soft voice, a child's whisper, coming from all directions. Find me? The water swirled, and an image appeared on its surface. A little boy with empty eyes, looking directly at Lisa. She was frightened, but instead of running away, she asked, How can I help you? There was no answer, only a coldness that enveloped everything around her. But deep down, Lisa knew that this boy wanted his body to be found, and she decided that she would return the next day with a boat to finally solve the mystery of Gravemore. Lisa woke up at dawn. Her dream had been restless, filled with images of the lake and the boy's face with empty eyes. But now fear gave way to determination. She must find his body and put an end to this horror. She went to the small pier where the locals used to keep their boats. Now the place looked abandoned. Broken boards, a thick layer of moss on the poles, and algae floating in the water. One of the old wooden boats looked still usable. Armed with a flashlight, a rope, and a long hook, Lisa pushed off from the shore and swam into the middle of the lake. The water was still and thick as black oil. Only rare circles from the paddle disturbed its peace. The lake seemed alive, as if it was watching her every move. Lisa looked up at the surface and saw her reflection, but it looked strange. Her eyes were too dark and her mouth was barely smiling. When she reached the middle of the lake, something changed. The air became colder, and fog began to rise from the water. Lisa felt the boat sway slightly, as if something had touched the bottom. She grabbed the rope with the hook and threw it into the water. The flashlight shone straight down, but the depth seemed endless. She lowered the hook even deeper, and suddenly the rope pulled taut. At first, Lisa thought she had hit roots or a sunken object, but as she began to pull the rope out, something moved in the water. It was something heavy, and every movement made the lake roar as if it were protesting. Finally, she pulled out a piece of old clothing that was wrapped around the hook. Her hands shook as she realized it was a child's sweater. Lisa put it aside, but suddenly the water near the boat began to boil. A figure appeared from the depths, the same boy. His hair was floating in the water, and his eyes remained empty, just like before. But now he was closer, and his gaze seemed to demand an answer. "I know you want to be found," Lisa whispered, but her voice was drowned in the sound of the rushing water. The boy raised his hand and pointed to another spot on the lake. Lisa summoned up the rest of her courage and steered the boat there. The depth seemed even more ominous, and the fog was getting thicker. The lake seemed to absorb the light, leaving only darkness. When she threw the hook into the water for the second time, the rope pulled almost immediately. It was hard to pull it out, as if something was holding it at the bottom. But after a few minutes of struggle, a large bag wrapped in seaweed appeared on the surface. It was heavy and cold, and when Lisa touched it, shivers ran down her spine. Untying the rope, she opened the sack and saw the remains, bones, decomposing clothes, and a small metal medallion in the shape of a heart. For a moment, she thought she heard a whisper, "Thank you." But her relief was short-lived. The lake began to change. The water was raging, the boat was rocking harder, and it seemed that something was rising from the depths. Lisa looked down and saw numerous figures moving under the surface. They were other victims of the lake, their faces contorted in expressions of pain and anger. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, but their hands were already reaching for the boat. At the last moment, Lisa threw the bag and the medallion into the water, as if returning what belonged to the lake. The water calmed down. The figures dissolved into darkness, and the lake became still again. Out of breath and shivering, Lisa returned to the shore. Her clothes were wet and her hands were shaking, but she felt that she had accomplished her task. She took one last look at the lake and saw the boy's figure appear on the surface. He was not smiling, but his eyes no longer seemed empty. He nodded before disappearing into the morning mist. Lisa, out of breath from her experience, finally stepped onto the solid shore. The lake, which had seemed alive to her, was now quiet. The sun was rising above the horizon, but its rays could not drive away the cold that filled her heart. She looked back and saw the fog disappearing, as if to hide what had happened. On the way home, she tried to collect her thoughts. It seemed to her that she had fulfilled her mission. She had found the boy's body and returned it to the lake. But the feeling of anxiety did not disappear. Something told her that this was not the end. When Lisa returned home, she noticed a metal medallion on her desk, the same one she had thrown into the water with the bag. Her body broke out in a cold sweat as she realized that the lake had not let her go. She tried to get rid of the medallion by throwing it in the trash, but the next morning it appeared in the same place again. It was a clear warning. That same night, Lisa was woken up by the sound of water. It sounded like it was coming from under the floor, dull and rhythmic, like the waves hitting the shore. She left the house and saw the fog rising again from the lake. In the light of the moon, Lisa could see silhouettes. They stood on the water, motionless, watching her. She realized that the lake had taken the boy, but the other souls who had fallen victim to it remained. They did not find peace. Lisa gathered all her strength and decided to return to Gravemoor one last time. She could not let these souls remain trapped. On the shore of the lake, she lit candles arranged in a circle and began to read words from an old ritual text she had found in her mother's diary. The ritual was supposed to free the souls that were bound to the lake. The air became thick, and it seemed that even time had stopped. The figures on the water began to move, approaching her. Their faces were contorted with pain, but their eyes were filled with hope. When the last words of the ritual were spoken, the lake was boiling. The water rose in a column, swallowing the figures. They didn't scream. They just quietly disappeared into the depths. Lisa felt something heavy leave her soul, as if the very burden of this place was receding. Finally, silence. The lake was as calm as a mirror. Lisa fell to her knees, exhausted but relieved. She knew that souls were now free, and this place no longer had power over people. At dawn, Lisa took one last look at Gravemoor. In its calm surface, she saw the reflection of a boy. His face was calm, and his eyes were no longer empty. He nodded, as if to thank her, and disappeared into the sunlight. Lisa left the town that day. She knew she would never return here again, but a part of her soul remained forever on the shores of Gravemoor. The lake was quiet now, but its story will live on in legend as a reminder that some secrets are best left hidden. A few weeks passed after Lisa left Ashwood. She tried to get back to normal, but something wouldn't let her go. It seemed to her that even in the noisy city, she could hear the soft lapping of the waves or feel the cold breath of the fog. The lake left its mark on her. One evening, when Lisa was getting ready to go to bed, a strange sound caught her attention. It was a faint whisper coming from the corridor. She got out of bed and, barely breathing, moved toward the sound. In the semi-darkness of the corridor, she saw a mirror standing on the floor, leaning against the wall. She was sure that he was not there. It was an ordinary mirror with a simple wooden frame. But when Lisa got closer, she saw something strange in the reflection. In the room behind her, which did not exist in reality, was the same lake. Its surface was quiet, but something dark was moving in its depths. Lisa backed away, but her eyes remained fixed on the mirror. From the darkness of the lake, a boy's face appeared in her reflection. It was him, the boy from Gravemoor. But his eyes were empty again, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. "Thank you," he whispered, but his voice sounded like the echo of thousands of voices. His face disappeared, and the reflection became ordinary. Lisa stood in front of the mirror for a long time, not daring to touch it. She felt that even though the story of Gravemoor was over, this mirror had become a new gateway between the world of the living and the dead. She realized that she could not get rid of this connection. The lake had left her, but its shadows still followed her. The next morning, the mirror disappeared. Lisa couldn't find it anywhere in her apartment. But since then, she never looked in a mirror again. Every time she walked past a reflective surface, she felt like something was watching her. And in this observation was not only the lake, but also all the shadows she had freed. Gravemoor Lake remained quiet, but its story lived on. Some people said they saw fog rising at night or heard soft voices from its shores. The legend became a superstition again, passed down from one generation to the next. And somewhere far away from Ashwood, Lisa lived with the realization that sometimes the doors we open never fully close.